The Detroit Motor Show is the first and biggest of the year, and here in the heart of the US and even the worldwide motor industry, the concept car was king. The new selling season is well underway for the car makers, but this is an industry that always has to plan well ahead. And so now is the time to show off the products that will be in the showrooms this autumn and beyond. As far beyond as 2005. This is the big one. This is Detroit. With Altima voted North America's Car of the Year, the new Z car definitely on its way to a showroom near you, and the replacement for the Skyline hovering in the wings, Nissan chose Detroit to launch its latest concept vehicle, the Quest. It's sad but true, but concept cars don't often make their way to the production line. But for Nissan especially, this has recently been a way of preparing the ground for new products. And that means that this car may well be a good indicator of what the future holds, and that may be sooner than you think.
The theme of this, exterior and interior, is the production theme. Now what you lose is the size of wheels and the amount of glass, like the glass you see here. But the spirit is to completely break the category of a minivan. Minivans are like pieces of bread here. They don't mean very much. No one wants to drive them. They're very boring. But people need them. So we are going to make a minivan that people want, and they happen to need it.
The fact that America thinks of this as a mini anything is a fair pointer to the fact that domestic products here in the USA remain unashamedly big. But the Quest also has that chiselled from a shiny aluminium brick look that was perfected by Audi, and it appears to go a long way towards proving that big is in fact beautiful. Inside, Quest again reflects the current trend towards not just minimalist but elegantly functional interiors made apparently from aluminium and not much else. It's nice to see things like this heading towards production as the car industry goes back to its roots and gives the power back to the designers.
There are very beautiful buildings and very talented architects. Why do they lead design trends, if you're going to say? Most like postmodernism or neoconstructivism, all these main design trends usually start from something outside of the automobile business. And for me, it seems interesting, let's create designisms in the car business. So it's an opportunity for us to express ourselves. So other than the functional limits of an automobile, for us it's a blank canvas. We're going to design something really great.
It was GM who established design as a key ingredient of sales success and perpetuated a system that allowed a succession of designers like Earl and Mitchell to wield immense influence over the car industry and beyond. A lot of that excitement disappeared under a tidal wave of market research in the 70s and 80s especially, and the result was a worldwide glut of bland, inoffensive cars that no one liked or wanted very much. But now there's a hint of romance in the air again, as the designers are set free to change the functional into the desirable. They've always been free at Saab, a bit too free if you want my opinion, but now the highly individualistic car maker has become part of the GM empire, with a brief to liberate the entire corporation, or something like that anyway. Certainly, Saab is destined to provide a major resource, giving the general access to current European designs and designers, with a long-term goal of setting the style and defining the language that will express the future look of GM products. An influx of funding is obviously the first step towards a car like this, one of two concept cars on the stand here in Detroit, and representative of fair investment. A running concept car can often absorb a $10 million budget without too much trouble. Prohibitively expensive for a niche manufacturer like Saab. However, there's a more than fair chance that what you're looking at here as a concept will eventually appear on the streets of Europe as a four-wheel drive crossover that will be sold as a Saab, and perhaps even as an Opel or a Vauxhall. Certainly, much of this technology will be featured on the replacement for the Vectra when it finally appears. Very much in line with current thinking, the 93X is Saab's entree into this concept car world where everything you see at the moment tends to be slab-fronted and have a small cut-off tail, wrapped around the rear wheels as closely as technology and legislation allow. And to that extent, it's very much a continuation of a theme that GM were expressing here in Detroit, with concept and concept-looking production vehicles proliferating on all its many stands. And though they all had the relevant family face, this being noticeably Saab from in front but nowhere else, apart from that, there was a moulded feeling to exteriors and even interiors too, with differences between them being far too often too subtle for the man in the street. Although, which man and which street? Well, but you can see what we mean. Of course, there's meant to be a family likeness here, because where 93X was the sensible face of the future from Saab, the 9X is, well, it's a sports car, but it's still a very sensible one, even with its two-door layout and 3-litre V6 engine. 300 horsepower, 1,300 kilos, limited to 150 miles an hour, standstill 260 in less than 3 seconds. What's sensible about that? Well, according to Saab, the plan here is to give you a car that looks and behaves like a sports car on the road, but which can still accommodate the grandfather clock, for which at one time you used to need a Volvo estate. It's a crossover, in other words, or a segment buster, as the Detroit buzzwords have it, and this very much was the buzz in Detroit, although for most car makers, a crossover segment buster has ironically created a new segment into which they all fit, because most of them are only crossing between two segments, being halfway between a sports saloon and a people carrier. But with its low looks and that extending load space, the Saab is crossing between two different segments entirely. Will it succeed? Well, like the 93X, it doesn't have to, because it isn't going on sale. But if the public likes it, if the reaction at Frankfurt and Detroit and then Geneva is good enough, then something very like it may well appear in a showroom, maybe wearing an Opel or a Vauxhall badge, or perhaps even as a Chevrolet. There are no major technical obstacles why it shouldn't go straight into production as it is, but there are possibly plenty of financial reasons why it won't. And here's another way of looking at the future as seen through the eyes of designers at Ford's Lincoln Mercury division, busy working to provide cutting-edge luxury in a formal sedan, like cigar humidors in the door pockets, for example, or their own version of the minimum effort boot space, complete with sliding floor and carefully detailed custom luggage. And be aware, as you look at this with increasing envy, that this was a big hit with other car industry executives busy snooping at the Lincoln concept car. While journalists film, photograph and scribble, car execs, black suits to a man, sneer, gasp or measure. They're the ones with steel tape measures crawling inside anything new that's got a production future. And while this car may not make it to the street looking like this, although there's no reason why it shouldn't, the boot and luggage mechanism most definitely will. And it won't only be in a Lincoln. It'll be on every luxury saloon car worthy of the name, and never mind the weight penalty or the space sacrifice involved. This car is an executive toy deluxe, and if you don't have one this time next year, then obviously you're not going to make it to the top of the corporate ladder, or you've already begun the slide back down. And it is that fierce and that literal here in America. The external styling, most Americans will probably take on trust. If it looks okay and reflects contemporary themes, then that's fine. But inside, there is no escape, and this has to be done right, and better than everyone else in some meaningful way. Though there is no real volume in these sales, this is the flagship of the Ford range, and it cannot be found wanting. And to be perfectly fair, it is quite nice. Not sure about the cigars, but otherwise fine. And although it's niche marketing for Ford and the real battle is lower down the marketplace, the Lincoln should have a halo effect across the range. But Lincoln's rival Cadillac has a concept car as well. Only the General's troops have gone the other way and built themselves a sports car. Two new sports cars and a retro reworking of a current production car. This is Detroit's International Auto Show, and anything can happen. Henry Leyland named his engineering company after Antoine Cadillac, the man who discovered and settled the area we now call Detroit. Leyland built his first car, called the Model A, in 1902, and like subsequent models, it reflected his never-ending pursuit of complete perfection. And now we have the Cien, Spanish for 100, a concept car designed as a celebration of 100 years of Cadillac manufacture. But it's far away from the retro theme that the rest of Detroit seems to have discovered with such relish. This year, Chevrolet and Ford were among the chief worshippers at the altar of retromania, so convincingly started by Chrysler with its Prowler and PT Cruiser. But Cadillac's concept car is nothing of the sort. Look back in Cadillac history and you won't find anything like this. Its shapes are all modern and yet have a lightness about them that the majority of slab-fronted and fat-rump concept cars have failed to deliver. Cien's not so much futuristic as modern. It's also something which few designers at Cadillac could have expected to work on, given the company's previous history. And yet there is a recent GT race history on which to draw.
My goal for this was to produce a lightweight, agile, usable car with good visibility. I mean, obviously performance, it has to perform, but it has a removable roof, say good visibility. And goal. It's an icon for Cadillac, this car. It celebrates its centenary. We wanted something unique. We wanted to show that, yes, there are other supercars out there with other manufacturers, but this is a first for Cadillac and basically a first for GM to do a performance vehicle like this.
It certainly looks the part, and remember too that Cadillac is in the process of a Le Mans project with very clear and ambitious goals. And if it ever does deliver the goods, then the creation of a road car like this one could be the logical result. The CN looks the part both outside and in, and you have to say that it represents not just a collection of current technology, but a very credible mixture of design and engineering. It doesn't require an enormous leap of imagination to see this car on the road. Arguably prettier than Volkswagen's upcoming two-seater, CN could easily give Cadillac a niche model with a very beneficial halo, especially if that Le Mans project does well. So the obvious question then, is this a concept car or a prototype?
Everybody that's looked at this car says build it, and a few years ago I don't think that would have happened. I mean, it's for Cadillac, people are beginning to believe, you know, we've entered Le Mans, we're doing racing, and to see a product like this, you know, it's even more believable.
The other thing about the CN that's worth remembering is that it's not just a show car. This one works as well. It's a runner, and that always makes you feel as if it's taken at least one step towards actual production. So maybe this, what happened in the arena after everyone had gone home, was the most important part of the day. And if you're looking for a believable performance vehicle, then you've come to the right place now. This was the surprise of the show for most people, and often for very different reasons to all concerned. But make no mistake, it is entirely credible. With the historical background of a genuine, paid-up racetrack legend on which to draw, Ford could hardly put a foot wrong in recreating the GT40, the car that won Le Mans and the World Championship and shamed Ferrari in the process. Ford produced it out of a hat here in Detroit with full-on corporate razzmatazz, but most observers found it an odd move for a company facing failing fortunes and factory closures. The original car didn't sell in high volumes, and this one probably won't be allowed to, despite its looks. There's a huge lump of the kit car industry supported by GT40 replicas, and this one won't put them out of business. It's a modern reworking of an old classic, yes, but it is still modern, even though it looks like a sharpened up but reasonably faithful replica. New legislation and technology make it quite a bit longer and a little bit higher, so that it should rightfully be called a GT43, since that's how tall it is now. But it's the name of legend that Ford wanted to have, of course, even to the extent of buying it back from the replica maker to whom it was incredibly sold years ago. Which may perhaps be a clue to serious production intentions, although there's plenty of argument about that. You only need to take one look to see that this GT40 is, like the original GT40, a racing car, pure and simple. There are no dashboard electronics, rear-facing cameras or infrared whatevers on this car, just an aluminium space frame, some rather elegant and true to original body panels, proper independent suspension, and of course a rather large mid-mounted V8 engine which mixes aluminium block and heads with an equally modern array of 4 cabs, 32 valves and a dirty big supercharger in order to deliver a massive 500 horsepower. In the production environment, if there ever is one, the blower would have to go. If for no other reason, then simply because new GT40 has been born into a world of product liability, and building a car which is beyond the driving ability of almost anyone likely to be able to pay for it will have the corporate lawyers jumping off the roof in droves. Not even the latest Lamborghini can keep up with the original GT40 in a straight line, so just think what this one will be like. The lawyers have, you can be sure. And yet Ford are hinting quite clearly at building this car, perhaps only in limited numbers, but certainly getting it on the street. And we can only say, go for it. Any V8 will do, skip the blower and price it against the 911. Woohoo, I want one! And so does everybody else. But no one apparently wants one of these anymore. Not long after the Thunderbird show car became the Thunderbird production car, Ford Design Studio set to work on the new car, taking it even further back in time and giving it a much more retro appearance, much aided by an all-black paint job. It reappeared in Detroit this year as a pretty red convertible with lots of hot rod styling tricks included in its chop-top lowrider look, complete with the French lights. And it looks as worthy as a production line candidate as any of the other retro cars we've seen in recent years. But the 49, as it's called, was the poor relation on the Ford stand this year, tucked away in a corner, hardly a spotlight to call its own, and certainly taking no part in the big-time unveilings in the Cobo Arena when Ford also unveiled its plans for the future. The comeback starts here was the corporate message, delivered almost in the same breath as news of job cuts, factory closures and last quarter losses of $900 million. The GT40 was an inherent part of that, the legend, an article of faith among Ford executives. But the 49, pretty as it is, now looks unlikely to ever make it into production. With the domestic industry in trouble, Japanese companies were making upmarket speeches all over Detroit, without exception announcing record North American sales figures, almost all of them for small, well-engineered cars, half the size of the domestic product, and if not half the price, certainly very cleverly priced. So, what's going on in Detroit? Is the giant asleep? And if so, when will it wake up? We'll be back next week for another look, and though we can't promise any answers to those questions, it'll be definitely worth the visit.